Hi, everybody. Welcome to Dulcimerica. Thanks for joining me. We're wrapping up this month's study of the electric mountain dulcimer this week with a look at technique and how to play an electric instrument. Now, you might not think there's a big difference once you take your mountain dulcimer off your lap, plug it in, and then put it back on your lap and play. But there's a lot of things you should think about and be ready for when it happens. Now, don't worry, it's nothing really big, but there is a marked difference between playing an acoustic instrument and one that is electric, that's going through some sort of sound system, amplification, and all that goes with it. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. First of all, not all electric mountain dulcimers are going to be as severe as the difference between an acoustic, let's say a dreadnought, and a 1965 Les Paul guitar, which is a solid body instrument, which means if you strum it, there's no sound coming out of it because there is no body to resonate and amplify that sound. So the chances of you playing a solid body mountain dulcimer are not exactly great, but they're not terribly slim either, because I know that there are some solid body electric dulcimers out there. So if you do have a solid body, you're going to need to plug into something in order to be heard. But most electric dulcimers are just acoustic dulcimers with a pickup built into it. And so that makes our work a little bit easier. But there is still a big difference between playing it acoustically, not plugged in, and then what happens when we actually jack in and turn up the volume. So check this out. Normally, we have to work a little bit when we're playing. Maybe our string action is a little high above the fretboard, and so we have to dig in and we have to press down a little bit harder on the strings. But generally speaking, electric instruments don't require that much effort. That means if you're used to really digging in and strumming hard, you're going to have to lay back a little bit, because it doesn't take much for this to ring out and do its thing. If you listen, it's still going. One of the big things that plugging in will do for the mountain dulcimer is bring you lots of sustain, glorious sustain. These notes ring out for a long time. And that's a wonderful thing. But you also have to be careful of that if you're playing fiddle tunes and other songs where you're doing a lot of action, because things can get muddy very, very quickly. The sound will begin to kind of blend together. What I like to do is I like to actually bring my volume down when I'm going to be playing with some more force, and that helps me to get a little bit of a better, more natural sound. So I'm actually going to pull back on the volume here and start strumming. And now I'm going to bring the volume up. And that's a little bit better. There's actually some peaks and valleys happening as opposed to just boom, one big expansion of sound out there. So dynamism, dynamics of volume, really important, not only for your playing, but also your volume control, because that's going to make a big difference in how everything sounds. We have lots of sustain here. And if you have a lower action on the instrument, again, you're not going to have to push down nearly as hard to get your frets going. In fact, most people that play an electric mountain dulcimer finds that it is an easier thing to do. And because it's easier, it can often lead to you being a little too confident that everything is in your wheelhouse. And you start to hear a lot of extra notes that come slipping around, because it doesn't take much to get the sounds picked up and going out your cable and into whatever it is you're monitoring with. So I use a lot of muting when I'm playing electric dulcimer. If I've got some string noise I don't want to happen, I use the palm mute, the right hand here, to just get on the strings and keep it quiet if I'm moving around. And with the left hand, sometimes I'll use that to mute sounds as well. One of my favorite tricks that I love showing people came about because I would often hear this when I was in the studio recording. It's when you take your fingers off the strings and just lift them up. You hear that sound? That's not a sound you hear very easily if you're in the jam, or even if you're in your study by yourself working with the mountain dulcimer, because it's not amplified. But as soon as you get it plugged in, every little sound all of a sudden becomes a major event, like taking your fingers off the strings. If they're sticky, for whatever reason, even if they're not sticky, you'll still get that. So this is one of my favorite tricks. Whenever you're taking your fingers off the strings, don't lift them directly off the strings. Roll them off of the strings. And that way you can see that we're not getting any sound. This versus this. It's those little tiny things that make all the difference in the world. So you, again, may not notice this a whole bunch when you're playing into an amplifier or into a PA system, a bigger sound system. But when you've got headphones on and you're listening to yourself practice, you will hear every single little thing that's going on. But that's a good thing, because there is a way to change how you play in order to smooth all of that stuff out. So when you do first get your electric mountain dulcimer, spend a lot of time in close quarters with it. Put some headphones on, pump it directly into your ears, and then play everything normally, and then make your adjustments as you go along. Listen to all that sweet sustain. Depending on how your settings are, if you've got compression running or you're EQ'd a certain way, you can really get this to ring out for a very long time. So there will be times when you will simply need to take your hand and place it down on the strings, especially if you're performing somewhere and you're talking. You'd be surprised at how much this all gets picked up, which is why I like using pedal boards that have a expression pedal or a volume pedal built into it, because if I'm not going to be actually playing, I will bring the volume down so that noise or that sound doesn't go out anywhere else. Beyond that, everything that you do on an acoustic dulcimer can be done on an electric dulcimer. So you can do bends and hammer-ons and pull-offs, but they will all carry a lot more weight, a lot more sustain, and be heard a lot clearly, which means you can play softer and lighter and still get the same results. That might take a little bit of getting used to. And when you go back and forth between your acoustic and your electric, you're going to have to adjust your touch a little bit. But once you get used to doing that, I think you're going to have an absolute blast. Hopefully you've been able to go over to McCaffertyDulcimers.com/support and see all of the really cool stuff that Steven Seifert and I have been posting. And I hope you were able to check out the Q&A that we did. And if not, make sure you check that out, because hopefully we answered a whole bunch of your questions about plugging in your mountain dulcimer. If not, you can always, I'm sure, reach out to Steven, and you can always and you can always email me at bingfutch@yahoo.com. Well, that's it for this week and this month. I'll be back in March with a whole new lesson plan going in a whole other different direction. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for stopping by, and keep playing. We'll see you next time.